Hello and welcome. Today, we'll be exploring the lives of 10 revolutionary leaders who changed the course of history. So grab a cup of tea, sit back, and let's whisper our way through history's most extraordinary revolutionaries. Shall we begin? Che Guevara is a name that instantly sparks debate, admiration, and even controversy. To some, he is the ultimate symbol of rebellion and justice. To others, he is a divisive figure whose methods raise difficult questions. Regardless of perspective, Ernesto Che Guevara's story is one of relentless determination, global ambition, and a commitment to fighting oppression. Who was Che Guevara? Born in 1928 in Rosario, Argentina, Che grew up in a middle-class family. Despite suffering from severe asthma, he excelled academically and developed a deep love for literature. His early life was shaped by ideas of justice and equality, but it wasn't until his motorcycle journey across South America that his revolutionary path began. Witnessing the extreme poverty and exploitation of indigenous communities, Che realized that these issues weren't isolated, they were systemic. He concluded that only revolutionary change could bring true justice. How did Che become a revolutionary? Che's turning point came in 1954 in Guatemala. There, he saw a U.S.-backed coup overthrow a democratically elected government, cementing his belief that imperialism was the root cause of inequality in Latin America. This experience pushed him towards Marxism. Soon after, he met Fidel and Raúl Castro in Mexico City. The brothers were planning to overthrow the Cuban dictator Fulgencio Batista, and Che quickly joined their cause, convinced that Cuba could be the starting point for a larger revolution. What role did Che play in the Cuban Revolution? In 1956, Che, the Castros, and a small group of revolutionaries landed in Cuba. Their initial efforts were disastrous, with most of the group killed or captured. But the survivors retreated to the Sierra Maestra Mountains, where they built a guerrilla army. Che, known for his discipline and intelligence, became one of Fidel's closest advisors. Che was not just a fighter, but also a strategist and leader. He inspired loyalty among his troops and earned respect for his willingness to endure the same hardships as his men. However, his methods were controversial. To maintain discipline and eliminate threats, he ordered executions of informants and deserters, actions that have drawn criticism and sparked debate about his legacy. By 1959, Batista's regime collapsed, and Che was a hero of the Cuban Revolution. In the new government, he took on key roles, including overseeing land reforms and literacy programs. But Che's revolutionary spirit wasn't satisfied with one victory. He believed that the fight against imperialism and inequality had to be waged on a global scale. Why did Che leave Cuba? Che could have remained a central figure in Cuba's government, but he chose to continue his fight elsewhere. He traveled to Africa to support anti-colonial movements, particularly in Congo, but this mission ended in failure. The rebels lacked coordination, and Che struggled to adapt to the local political landscape. Undeterred, he turned his attention to Bolivia, hoping to ignite a continent-wide revolution. What happened in Bolivia? Che's campaign in Bolivia was fraught with challenges. His small guerrilla force, isolated from local support and relentlessly pursued by the Bolivian military, faced constant shortages of food and supplies. In October 1967, Che was captured in a remote village. The following day, he was executed by Bolivian soldiers, reportedly under CIA orders. His final words were defiant: "Shoot, coward. You are only going to kill a man." What is Che's legacy? Che's death immortalized him as a global icon. His image, bearded, wearing a beret with a single star, became a symbol of rebellion and resistance. For many, he represents the fight against imperialism and oppression. For others, his use of violence and his rigid ideology make his legacy more complicated. His writings, including the Motorcycle Diaries and Guerrilla Warfare, continue to inspire activists and revolutionaries. His story raises important questions. Can meaningful change be achieved without violence? How much sacrifice is too much in the pursuit of justice? Why does Che matter today? Che's story resonates because it is about more than politics. It is about the power of conviction. Whether seen as a hero or a flawed idealist, Che challenges us to consider what we are willing to fight for. He once said, "The true revolutionary is guided by great feelings of love." Che's life is a reminder that the pursuit of justice is never simple, but it is always worth striving for. His legacy invites us to reflect on the balance between ideals and reality, and the cost of trying to change the world. Mahatma Gandhi, the revolutionary who changed the world without violence. When you think of revolutionaries, what comes to mind? Uprisings, battles, or perhaps fiery speeches. Now, imagine a man who led one of the most successful revolutions in history without ever raising a weapon. That's Mahatma Gandhi, the gentle yet unyielding leader who inspired millions to fight for India's independence through nonviolence. Who was Gandhi? Born in 1869 in Porbandar, a small town in western India, Mohandas Karamchand Gandhi grew up in a devout Hindu household. His family valued simplicity, honesty, and service to others, principles that would guide Gandhi throughout his life. But did you know he wasn't always the confident leader we now remember? As a child, Gandhi was shy and quiet. In fact, he once admitted he was terrified of public speaking. So, how did this timid boy transform into a global symbol of resistance? It started with a journey to London in 1888 to study law. There, Gandhi became fascinated with different religions and philosophies, from Hinduism and Christianity to the writings of Leo Tolstoy and Henry David Thoreau. But his true awakening came when he moved to South Africa in 1893. Why is South Africa so important to Gandhi's story? Great question. In South Africa, Gandhi faced racial discrimination that shocked and enraged him. Once, he was thrown off a train for refusing to move from a whites-only compartment, despite having a valid ticket. Incidents like this were a turning point for Gandhi. He realized that oppression wasn't just a personal injustice, it was a systemic problem that needed to be challenged. But instead of fighting fire with fire, he developed the idea of satyagraha, or truth force, a philosophy of nonviolent resistance. Gandhi spent 21 years in South Africa, leading campaigns for the rights of Indian immigrants. His methods were revolutionary: protests, boycotts, and civil disobedience, all peaceful but powerful. By the time he returned to India in 1915, he was already a seasoned activist with a clear mission. What made Gandhi's approach so different? Here's where Gandhi stood out. He believed that the means were just as important as the end. To him, achieving freedom through violence would only replace one form of oppression with another. Instead, he encouraged people to confront injustice with courage and compassion. He once said, "An eye for an eye only ends up making the whole world blind." When Gandhi joined the Indian independence movement, he applied these principles on a massive scale. His leadership during events like the Salt March in 1930 showed how nonviolence could unite a nation. The Salt March was a protest against British salt taxes, where Gandhi and thousands of followers walked 240 miles to the Arabian Sea to make their own salt. It was a simple act, but it captured the imagination of the world and highlighted the absurdity of colonial rule. Was it all smooth sailing for Gandhi? Not at all. Gandhi faced criticism from all sides. Some thought his methods were too slow, while others doubted nonviolence could succeed against a powerful empire like Britain. Even within the Indian independence movement, leaders like Subhas Chandra Bose preferred more aggressive tactics. And let's not forget, Gandhi spent years in prison for his protests. Yet, he never wavered in his commitment to peace. What did Gandhi achieve? Gandhi's efforts culminated in 1947, when India gained independence from Britain. But his vision went beyond political freedom. He dreamed of an India united by compassion, where people of all religions and castes lived as equals. Unfortunately, this dream was shattered by the partition of India and Pakistan, which led to widespread violence. Gandhi's heartbreak over the division was profound, but he continued to preach peace, even risking his life to stop riots between Hindus and Muslims. What happened to Gandhi in the end? On January 30th, 1948, Gandhi was assassinated by a Hindu nationalist who opposed his calls for unity between Hindus and Muslims. His death was a tragedy, but his legacy endures. Today, Gandhi is remembered as the father of modern India and an icon of nonviolent resistance. Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the architect of modern Turkey. Few revolutionaries have reshaped their nations as profoundly as Mustafa Kemal Ataturk, the founder of the Republic of Turkey. Born in 1881 in the Ottoman city of Salonika, modern-day Thessaloniki, Greece, Ataturk's vision, determination, and leadership transformed Turkey into a modern, secular, and independent republic. His reforms not only changed the course of Turkish history, but also left an enduring legacy as a leader who balanced revolutionary ideals with pragmatic action. Who was Mustafa Kemal Ataturk? Ataturk was born into a modest family during a time of great turmoil for the Ottoman Empire. As a young man, he attended military schools, where he displayed exceptional talent in leadership and strategy. His education and early career in the Ottoman military exposed him to the weaknesses of the empire, which was struggling to maintain its territories against external pressures and internal divisions. Ataturk's revolutionary spirit was evident even during his early military campaigns. He believed the Ottoman Empire needed to embrace modernity and reform if it was to survive. However, he also recognized that the empire's deeply rooted traditions and rigid hierarchy were major obstacles to progress. What role did Ataturk play in the Turkish War of Independence? After World War I, the Ottoman Empire faced total collapse. The Treaty of Sèvres, imposed by the Allied powers in 1920, sought to partition the empire, leaving Turkey with only a fraction of its territory. This humiliation galvanized Ataturk, who emerged as the leader of the Turkish nationalist movement. Ataturk organized resistance against both foreign occupation and the Ottoman Sultanate, which he saw as complicit in Turkey's decline. His leadership during the Turkish War of Independence, 1919 to 1923, was decisive. From organizing the Grand National Assembly in Ankara to leading military victories in battles such as Sakarya and Dumlupınar, Ataturk demonstrated extraordinary resolve and strategic brilliance. By 1923, the nationalist forces succeeded in abolishing the Sultanate and securing international recognition for the Republic of Turkey through the Treaty of Lausanne. Ataturk became the Republic's first president, but his revolution was far from over. What were Ataturk's revolutionary reforms? Ataturk's vision for Turkey was rooted in the principles of secularism, modernization, and nationalism. He believed that Turkey's future depended on breaking away from Ottoman traditions and embracing Western-style reforms. His changes were sweeping and transformative. Abolition of the Caliphate. Ataturk separated religion from state affairs, ending centuries of Islamic rule and Turkish governance. This move established Turkey as a secular republic. Legal and social reforms. Ataturk replaced Islamic law with a secular civil code, granting equal rights to men and women. Women were given the right to vote and hold public office, making Turkey one of the first countries to achieve this milestone. Alphabet reform. Ataturk introduced the Latin alphabet to replace the Arabic script, making reading and writing more accessible and modernizing education. Economic modernization. He encouraged industrialization and state-led economic initiatives, laying the foundation for Turkey's future growth. Cultural changes. Ataturk promoted a sense of national identity, emphasizing Turkish history and culture while discouraging Ottoman influences. He also encouraged Western-style clothing, arts, and social practices. How did Ataturk lead Turkey? Ataturk's leadership style was marked by his charisma, intellect, and ability to inspire loyalty. However, he was also an authoritarian leader who believed that rapid and radical change required strong, centralized control. While his reforms brought immense progress, they were often implemented without room for dissent. This approach has sparked debates about his legacy, with some praising his vision and others critiquing his methods. What challenges did Ataturk face? Ataturk's reforms were not universally accepted. Many conservative and rural communities resisted changes that they felt undermined their traditions and religious values. Ataturk faced significant opposition, but he remained steadfast in his belief that modernization was essential for Turkey's survival and independence. What is Ataturk's legacy? Ataturk passed away in 1938, but his influence continues to shape Turkey. His image and principles, known as Kemalism, remain central to Turkish identity. He is celebrated as a national hero, with his mausoleum in Ankara Anıtkabir serving as a symbol of his enduring legacy. Globally, Ataturk is admired as a revolutionary who successfully balanced tradition with progress, nationalism with modernization, and leadership with vision. His reforms inspired other nations, showing that transformative change was possible even in the face of immense challenges. Why does Ataturk matter today? Ataturk's story is not just about Turkey. It's about the universal struggle for independence, progress, and self-determination. He once said, "Peace at home, peace in the world," a principle that reflects his belief in diplomacy and coexistence. Ataturk's life challenges us to consider how leadership, vision, and resilience can shape not just a nation, but also its place in the world. When we think of revolutionaries, we often picture battles and uprisings. But Martin Luther King Jr., the leader of the American Civil Rights Movement, showed the world that profound change could also come from peaceful protest. Born in 1929 in Atlanta, Georgia, King's life was dedicated to the fight for racial equality, justice, and the idea that love and nonviolence could overcome even the deepest divisions. Who was Martin Luther King Jr.? Martin Luther King Jr. was born into a deeply segregated America. Growing up in the Jim Crow South, he experienced racism from a young age, witnessing the systemic inequalities that kept Black Americans oppressed. Yet, he also grew up in a family that valued education, faith, and community. His father, a Baptist preacher, instilled in him a belief in justice and the power of the church to inspire change. King's intellectual and spiritual journey took him to Morehouse College, Crozer Theological Seminary, and Boston University, where he earned his doctorate in theology. It was during these years that he encountered the teachings of Mahatma Gandhi, whose philosophy of nonviolence would profoundly shape his own approach to activism. What sparked King's involvement in the civil rights movement? The turning point came in 1955 with the Montgomery bus boycott. After Rosa Parks was arrested for refusing to give up her seat to a white passenger, the Black community in Montgomery, Alabama, organized a year-long boycott of the city's buses. King, then a young preacher, was chosen to lead the effort. His speeches inspired thousands to join the cause, even as participants faced threats, violence, and arrests. The boycott's success marked the beginning of King's rise as a national leader. What made King's approach unique? King believed in the power of nonviolent resistance, a strategy rooted in moral conviction. He often said, "Darkness cannot drive out darkness. Only light can do that. Hate cannot drive out hate. Only love can do that." This philosophy guided his leadership, whether organizing sit-ins, marches, or boycotts. King's vision was not just about ending segregation. It was about creating a society where all people could live with dignity, respect, and opportunity. The March on Washington and the "I Have a Dream" speech. One of the most iconic moments of King's career came on August 28, 1963, during the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom. Standing before a crowd of over 250,000 people at the Lincoln Memorial, King delivered his famous "I Have a Dream" speech. His words, a call for racial harmony and justice, resonated deeply. "I have a dream that my 4 little children will one day live in a nation where they will not be judged by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character." The speech became a defining moment in the civil rights movement, capturing the hope and determination of a generation. It also helped galvanize support for landmark legislation, including the Civil Rights Act of 1964 and the Voting Rights Act of 1965. What challenges did King face? King's journey was far from easy. He faced constant threats to his life and was arrested multiple times. His leadership was also criticized, both by those who thought he was too radical and by younger activists who believed his methods were too slow. Despite these challenges, King remained steadfast, driven by a deep sense of purpose and faith. The fight for economic justice. In his later years, King broadened his focus to include economic inequality, which he saw as deeply intertwined with racial injustice. He organized the Poor People's Campaign, advocating for fair wages, affordable housing, and economic opportunities for all Americans. His message became increasingly bold, criticizing the U.S. government's role in perpetuating poverty and inequality. How did King's life end? On April 4, 1968, King was assassinated in Memphis, Tennessee, where he had gone to support striking sanitation workers. His death was a devastating blow to the civil rights movement and the nation as a whole. Yet, even in death, King's legacy endured. His words, actions, and vision continue to inspire movements for justice and equality around the world. Why does Martin Luther King Jr. matter today? King's impact extends far beyond his lifetime. His belief in nonviolence as a tool for change has influenced countless leaders and movements, from Nelson Mandela in South Africa to contemporary activists fighting for racial justice and human rights. His dream of equality remains unfinished, serving as both a reminder of how far we've come and how much further we have to go. Martin Luther King Jr. once said, "The arc of the moral universe is long, but it bends toward justice." His life proves that even in the face of hatred and oppression, one voice can ignite a movement, change a nation, and inspire the world. Nelson Mandela, the man who fought for freedom and forgiveness. What does it take to change a nation? Is it power, wealth, or perhaps something far simpler but infinitely harder? Courage, resilience, and the ability to forgive? These qualities defined Nelson Mandela, the man who became the face of the fight against apartheid and a global symbol of justice and reconciliation. Who was Nelson Mandela? Born in 1918 in the small village of Mvizo in South Africa, Mandela was given the name Ralilala, which means pulling the branch of a tree, or more figuratively, troublemaker. Fitting, isn't it? But young Mandela didn't seem destined for a revolutionary path at first. Raised in a royal family of the Xhosa-speaking Thembu people, he was expected to follow a traditional path of leadership. However, life had other plans for him. Mandela's early years were shaped by stories of African resistance against colonial rule. He studied law, becoming one of the first black South Africans to do so, and his experiences in the racially segregated city of Johannesburg exposed him to the brutal realities of apartheid, a system designed to enforce racial inequality and strip black South Africans of their rights. It was here that Mandela's journey as a revolutionary began. What was apartheid, and why did Mandela fight it? Apartheid wasn't just a policy, it was a way of life that institutionalized discrimination. Black South Africans were denied basic rights, segregated from white communities, and subjected to brutal repression. Mandela joined the African National Congress (ANC) in 1943, determined to dismantle this system. At first, Mandela advocated for peaceful protests, inspired by Gandhi's philosophy of nonviolence. But the Sharpeville massacre of 1960, where 69 unarmed protesters were killed by police, marked a turning point. Mandela realized that nonviolence alone might not be enough. He co-founded Umkhonto we Sizwe, the armed wing of the ANC, which carried out acts of sabotage against government targets. He wasn't advocating for violence against people, only against the oppressive system. Why did Mandela go to prison? In 1962, Mandela was arrested and charged with sabotage and conspiracy to overthrow the government. During his trial, known as the Rivonia trial, he gave a speech that became legendary. He declared, "I have fought against white domination, and I have fought against black domination. I have cherished the ideal of a democratic and free society. It is an ideal for which I am prepared to die." Mandela was sentenced to life imprisonment and spent the next 27 years behind bars, most of them on Robben Island. Imagine being locked away for nearly 3 decades, isolated from your family, friends, and the cause you devoted your life to. Yet Mandela refused to give in to bitterness. Instead, he used this time to reflect, study, and prepare for the future. What happened when Mandela was released? In 1990, after growing international pressure and decades of resistance within South Africa, the apartheid regime began to crumble. Mandela was released from prison at the age of 71, walking out with his head held high and his resolve unbroken. His release was celebrated worldwide, but the road ahead was still uncertain. South Africa was on the brink of civil war, with deep divisions between its people. Mandela's greatest achievement wasn't just ending apartheid, it was the way he ended it. Instead of seeking revenge, he chose reconciliation. Imagine this. After nearly 3 decades in prison, wouldn't you want justice or even retribution? Mandela didn't. He understood that healing a nation required forgiveness and unity. As South Africa's first black president, elected in 1994, Mandela led with a vision of equality and peace. He established the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, where victims of apartheid could share their stories and perpetrators could confess their crimes. It wasn't perfect, but it allowed the nation to confront its painful past and begin to move forward. Was Mandela perfect? Of course not. Mandela himself admitted that he was no saint. He was a politician, and like all leaders, he faced criticism for some of his decisions. Economic inequality in South Africa remains a challenge to this day, and his presidency couldn't solve every problem the country faced. But what sets Mandela apart is his humility and his willingness to prioritize the greater good over personal power. Mandela passed away in 2013, but his legacy endures. Today, his name is synonymous with courage, forgiveness, and the belief that one person truly can make a difference. Simón Bolívar is a name that resonates across Latin America as a symbol of freedom and revolution. Known as El Libertador, Bolívar was the driving force behind the independence movements that freed much of South America from Spanish colonial rule. Born in 1783 in Caracas, Venezuela, Bolívar's vision of a united and independent continent shaped his life and legacy. Who was Simón Bolívar? Bolívar was born into a wealthy Creole family of Spanish descent, which afforded him an elite education. Orphaned at a young age, he was raised by tutors who instilled in him the Enlightenment ideals of liberty, equality, and justice. A formative trip to Europe exposed him to the political upheavals of the time, including the French Revolution and Napoleon's rise to power. These experiences sparked Bolívar's belief that South America, too, could break free from colonial rule. However, Bolívar's path to becoming a revolutionary leader wasn't immediate. Early in his life, he struggled with personal tragedies, including the death of his young wife. It was during this period of grief and reflection that Bolívar committed himself fully to the cause of independence, vowing to dedicate his life to liberating his homeland. What inspired Bolívar's revolutionary vision? Bolívar was deeply influenced by the Enlightenment thinkers of the 18th century, such as Rousseau, Montesquieu, and Voltaire. He believed in the ideals of freedom and equality, but also recognized the challenges of implementing these ideas in a continent marked by deep social and racial divides. Bolívar envisioned a united South America, where former colonies could form a powerful federation capable of thriving independently of European influence. How did Bolívar lead South America to independence? Bolívar's military campaigns were as bold as his vision. His fight for independence began in 1810, when Venezuela declared autonomy from Spain. However, the struggle was far from straightforward. Early victories were followed by crushing defeats, forcing Bolívar into exile multiple times. Yet, he refused to give up. One of Bolívar's most famous feats was his daring crossing of the Andes in 1819. Leading an army through treacherous mountain terrain, he surprised Spanish forces in modern-day Colombia, securing a decisive victory at the Battle of Boyacá. This marked the beginning of a series of victories that liberated Colombia, Venezuela, Ecuador, Peru, and Bolivia. Bolívar's leadership wasn't limited to the battlefield. He was also a skilled politician and visionary statesman. In 1821, he helped establish the Republic of Gran Colombia, a union of several liberated territories. He envisioned this as the foundation of a larger federation that could rival the power of the United States or Europe. What challenges did Bolívar face? Bolivar's dream of a united South America was ambitious but fraught with difficulties. The newly independent nations were plagued by political divisions, regional rivalries, and social inequalities. Bolivar himself acknowledged the immense challenges, famously stating, "I have plowed the sea." Despite his best efforts, Gran Colombia eventually fractured, and Bolivar faced mounting criticism from former allies. Bolivar's leadership style also drew controversy. While he championed freedom and democracy, he sometimes adopted authoritarian measures to maintain order in the face of chaos. His detractors accused him of being a dictator, and by the end of his life, Bolivar found himself isolated and disillusioned. How did Bolivar's life end? In 1830, Bolivar resigned from power, deeply disappointed by the fragmentation of his vision. He planned to leave South America for exile in Europe, but illness cut his plans short. Bolivar died of tuberculosis at the age of 47 in Santa Marta, Colombia, far from the power and influence he once held. What is Bolivar's legacy? Despite the challenges and controversies, Bolivar's impact on South America is undeniable. He liberated millions from colonial rule and inspired generations with his vision of unity and independence. Today, he is celebrated as a national hero in several countries, with cities, currencies, and even a country, Bolivia, named in his honor. Bolivar's life is a testament to the complexities of revolution. He was a man of immense ambition and conviction, whose successes and failures both shaped the course of history. His dream of a united South America may not have been realized, but his efforts laid the groundwork for the continent's modern nations. Rosa Luxemburg, the Red Rose of Revolution. Rosa Luxemburg was a revolutionary who believed in the power of ideas, the strength of the working class, and the possibility of a fairer world. Born in 1871 in Zamość, Poland, Luxemburg's life was a testament to courage, intellect, and unwavering commitment to social justice. As a leader in the international socialist movement, she challenged not just the political systems of her time but also the strategies of her own comrades, carving out a unique legacy in the history of revolution. Who was Rosa Luxemburg? Rosa grew up in a Jewish family in Russian-controlled Poland, a place where oppression was deeply entrenched. From a young age, she showed remarkable intelligence and a rebellious spirit. At just 16, she joined a socialist movement, dedicating herself to fighting for workers' rights and against authoritarian rule. Her activism forced her to flee to Switzerland, where she studied philosophy, history, and economics. Luxemburg's sharp mind and fiery personality quickly made her a prominent figure in socialist circles. She earned a doctorate in economics, an impressive feat for a woman at the time, and began publishing works that critiqued capitalism and imperialism. Her intellect was matched by her courage. She wasn't afraid to challenge anyone, whether it was the ruling elite or her own comrades. What made Luxemburg's ideas so revolutionary? Luxemburg believed that true socialism could only come from the collective action of the working class. Unlike some socialists who favored gradual reform or a centralized party leading to revolution, she insisted that change had to be driven from below. She famously wrote, "Freedom is always the freedom of those who think differently." This belief in grassroots democracy set her apart from other revolutionaries of her time. One of Luxemburg's most important contributions was her critique of imperialism. In her book, The Accumulation of Capital, she argued that capitalism relied on constant expansion, exploiting colonies and weaker nations to survive. This idea would later influence anti-colonial movements and critiques of global capitalism. How did Luxemburg become involved in German politics? In the early 20th century, Luxemburg moved to Germany, where she became a leading figure in the Social Democratic Party, SPD. At the time, the SPD was Europe's largest socialist party, but Luxemburg often found herself at odds with its leadership. When the party supported Germany's entry into World War I, she was outraged. She saw the war as a conflict fueled by capitalist greed, with workers from different nations forced to kill each other for the benefit of the ruling class. In response, Luxemburg co-founded the Spartacus League, a revolutionary socialist group dedicated to ending the war and overthrowing the German monarchy. Her activism led to multiple arrests, and she spent much of the war in prison. Even behind bars, she continued to write, producing some of her most powerful works, including the Junius pamphlet, in which she condemned the war and called for international solidarity among workers. What was Luxemburg's role in the German Revolution? In 1918, as World War I came to an end, Germany was in turmoil. Workers and soldiers were rising up against the monarchy, demanding an end to the war and the establishment of a republic. Luxemburg saw this as a moment of opportunity. She and her comrades in the Spartacus League called for a socialist revolution, believing that the time had come for workers to seize power. However, the revolution was chaotic, and the socialist movement was deeply divided. Luxemburg opposed the Bolsheviks' authoritarian approach in Russia, insisting that democracy was essential for socialism to succeed. Her commitment to these principles often put her at odds with other revolutionaries, but she refused to compromise her beliefs. What happened to Rosa Luxemburg? In January 1919, the Spartacus League led an uprising in Berlin, known as the Spartacist Revolt. The revolt was crushed by the government, which had called in right-wing paramilitary forces known as the Freikorps. Luxemburg was arrested during the chaos. On January 15, 1919, she was brutally murdered by her captors, her body thrown into a canal. Her death was a devastating loss to the socialist movement, but her ideas lived on. Luxemburg's writings and speeches continued to inspire generations of activists, from anti-fascists in the 1930s to feminists and anti-capitalists in the 21st century. Karl Marx, the revolutionary thinker who redefined the world. Karl Marx was not a military leader or a political figure like many other revolutionaries, but his ideas sparked movements that reshaped nations, economies, and societies. Born in 1818 in Trier, Germany, Marx is best known as the father of communism. His writings and philosophies challenged the foundations of capitalism and inspired revolutions across the globe, making him one of the most influential thinkers in history. Who was Karl Marx? Marx was born into a middle-class family in Germany, where he received an excellent education. He studied law and philosophy at university, diving deep into the works of Hegel and other great thinkers of the time. Marx's intellectual curiosity and critical nature led him to question the systems of power and inequality he saw around him. He became a journalist, using his pen to expose injustice and challenge authority, which eventually got him banned from Germany, France, and Belgium. Marx spent much of his life in exile, living in London with his family in conditions of poverty and hardship. Despite these struggles, he remained committed to his work, collaborating with his lifelong friend and supporter Friedrich Engels. What made Marx's ideas revolutionary? Marx's revolutionary vision was rooted in his analysis of capitalism. He argued that capitalism was inherently exploitative, with the working class proletariat forced to sell their labor to the owning class bourgeoisie in exchange for survival. This system, he believed, created inequality, alienation, and cycles of crisis. In 1848, Marx and Engels published the Communist Manifesto, a short yet powerful document calling for workers of the world to unite and overthrow the capitalist system. The manifesto outlined the principles of communism, envisioning a society where wealth and resources were shared equally and class divisions were eliminated. Marx's magnum opus, Das Kapital. Marx's most significant work, Das Kapital, delves deeper into his critique of capitalism. He analyzed the way capital accumulates, the exploitation of labor, and the contradictions within the system that he argued would ultimately lead to its collapse. Though dense and complex, Das Kapital laid the theoretical groundwork for countless socialist and communist movements. Did Marx ever lead a revolution? Interestingly, Marx himself was not a revolutionary leader in the traditional sense. He did not command armies or lead uprisings. Instead, his weapon was his intellect and his pen. He believed that the proletariat, armed with the knowledge of their exploitation, would rise up to overthrow the bourgeoisie and establish a classless society. Marx's role was to provide the ideological framework for this transformation. While Marx did not live to see his ideas put into practice, his theories inspired revolutions worldwide, from the Russian Revolution in 1917 to anti-colonial movements in the 20th century. Why is Marx controversial? Marx's ideas have been both celebrated and criticized. Supporters see him as a visionary who exposed the flaws of capitalism and imagined a more equitable world. Critics, however, argue that Marx's theories are overly idealistic and that attempts to implement them have often led to authoritarian regimes. From the Soviet Union to Maoist China, the real-world application of Marxism has been marked by both progress and tragedy. It's important to note that Marx himself envisioned a democratic, stateless society, far from the oppressive systems that some regimes implemented in his name. His work remains open to interpretation, sparking debates among scholars, politicians, and activists to this day. What is Marx's legacy? Love him or hate him, Marx's influence is undeniable. His critique of capitalism remains relevant in discussions about economic inequality, worker exploitation, and globalization. Concepts like class struggle, alienation, and surplus value are still central to understanding modern economics and society. Beyond economics, Marx's ideas have shaped art, literature, and philosophy. His theories about power and ideology have been applied to analyze culture, media, and politics, influencing fields as diverse as sociology and critical theory. Why does Karl Marx matter today? Marx's vision of a world without oppression or exploitation continues to inspire activists and thinkers. In a time of growing economic inequality, climate change, and labor struggles, many turn to Marx's work for answers. His belief that people could collectively build a better future resonates with those who seek systemic change. Marx famously declared, "The philosophers have only interpreted the world in various ways. The point, however, is to change it." Whether you agree with his solutions or not, his call to action remains as powerful today as it was in his time. George Washington, the revolutionary father of a nation. George Washington is often referred to as the father of the United States, and for good reason. As the leader of the American Revolution and the first president of the United States, Washington played a crucial role in shaping the nation. But he was more than just a founding father. He was a revolutionary who fought for independence, led with integrity, and set the foundation for modern democracy. Who was George Washington? Born in 1732 in the Virginia colony, Washington grew up on a tobacco plantation, surrounded by the tensions of colonial life. Though he didn't come from a wealthy family, his ambition and strong work ethic propelled him into the world of leadership. As a young man, Washington worked as a surveyor before joining the Virginia militia, where his military career began. It was during his service in the French and Indian War, 1754 to 1763, that Washington gained valuable experience in leadership and strategy. However, it also exposed him to the realities of British colonial rule, rules that often treated American colonists as second-class citizens. These early experiences planted the seeds of his revolutionary spirit. What led Washington to the revolution? By the 1760s, tensions between the American colonies and Britain were escalating. Colonists resented being taxed without representation in Parliament, and British policies increasingly restricted their rights. Washington, like many of his contemporaries, believed that the colonies had the right to govern themselves. When the Revolutionary War broke out in 1775, Washington was appointed commander-in-chief of the Continental Army. Leading an untrained, poorly equipped force against the might of the British Empire was no small task, but Washington's leadership turned the tide of the war. He wasn't just a skilled strategist. He was a symbol of resilience and unity for a divided nation. What were Washington's greatest challenges during the war? Washington's leadership during the Revolutionary War was defined by perseverance. The Continental Army faced enormous hardships, limited resources, harsh winters, and internal divisions. One of his most famous moments came during the winter of 1777 to 1778 at Valley Forge, where his army endured brutal conditions. Instead of breaking under the pressure, Washington inspired his troops to keep fighting, turning a struggling militia into a disciplined force. Washington's victories weren't always on the battlefield. His strategic retreats and ability to outlast the British played a crucial role in the war's outcome. The turning point came in 1781, when Washington's forces, with French assistance, defeated the British at Yorktown, effectively securing American independence. What did Washington do after the war? When the war ended, Washington could have used his newfound power to become a monarch or dictator, something many leaders in his position might have done. Instead, he surprised everyone by stepping down from his military role and returning to civilian life. This act of humility cemented his reputation as a leader who truly served the people. However, Washington's work wasn't finished. The newly independent United States faced significant challenges: a weak central government, economic struggles, and disagreements among the states. In 1787, Washington presided over the Constitutional Convention, where the U.S. Constitution was drafted, creating a stronger federal government. His leadership and ability to mediate disputes were crucial to the convention's success. Why was Washington chosen as the first president? In 1789, Washington was unanimously elected as the first president of the United States, a testament to the trust and respect he had earned. As president, he set many of the traditions and precedents that continue today. He established the cabinet system, emphasized the importance of a peaceful transfer of power, and refused to serve more than 2 terms, ensuring that the presidency would not become a lifelong position. Washington's presidency was not without its challenges. He faced political divisions between emerging factions, debates over the country's financial system, and tensions with foreign powers. Yet, his steady leadership helped stabilize the young nation and laid the groundwork for its future success. What is Washington's legacy? George Washington's legacy is vast. He wasn't just a military leader or a president. He was a unifying figure who embodied the ideals of the American Revolution. His commitment to democracy and his refusal to cling to power set an example for leaders worldwide. Washington also understood the fragility of what the United States had achieved. In his farewell address, he warned against political factions, sectionalism, and entangling alliances, warnings that remain relevant today. Why does George Washington matter today? Washington's story is a reminder of the importance of integrity, humility, and service in leadership. He showed that revolutions aren't just about defeating an enemy, they're about building something better. His life challenges us to think about the responsibilities of freedom and the sacrifices required to achieve it. As the father of a nation, Washington's vision and values continue to shape the United States. His legacy isn't just about the past, it's a lesson for the present and a guide for the future. Vladimir Lenin, the architect of the Russian Revolution. Vladimir Lenin is one of the most influential and controversial figures in modern history. As the leader of the Bolshevik Party, he orchestrated the October Revolution of 1917, overthrowing the Russian provisional government and establishing the world's first socialist state. Lenin's vision and leadership reshaped Russia and inspired revolutionary movements worldwide. But his legacy is as complex as it is monumental. Who was Lenin? Born Vladimir Ilyich Ulyanov in 1870 in Simbirsk, Russia, Lenin grew up in a well-educated, middle-class family. His early life was marked by a tragic event that would deeply influence his worldview: the execution of his older brother Alexander for plotting to assassinate Tsar Alexander III. This loss radicalized Lenin, pushing him toward revolutionary politics. Lenin excelled academically, particularly in law, but he was drawn to Marxist ideas, which were gaining traction among Russian intellectuals. By the 1890s, Lenin had become a committed Marxist, believing that the working class must overthrow the ruling elite to create a classless society. His revolutionary activities led to his arrest and exile in Siberia, but this only strengthened his resolve. What made Lenin a revolutionary leader? Lenin's genius lay in his ability to adapt Marxist theory to Russia's unique conditions. Unlike Marx, who envisioned revolution in industrialized nations, Lenin believed that a socialist revolution could occur in a largely agrarian society like Russia. He argued that a tightly organized, disciplined vanguard party was necessary to lead the working class to victory. In 1903, Lenin's ideas caused a split in the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, creating 2 factions: the Bolsheviks, majority, led by Lenin, and the Mensheviks, minority. Lenin's Bolsheviks were more radical, advocating immediate revolution rather than gradual reform. His leadership and strategic vision set the stage for the events that would unfold in 1917. How did Lenin lead the Russian Revolution? By 1917, Russia was in turmoil. World War I had devastated the economy, and widespread dissatisfaction with Tsar Nicholas II led to his abdication during the February Revolution. A provisional government was established, but it failed to address key issues like land reform and peace. Lenin, who had been in exile, returned to Russia in April 1917 with a bold message: peace, land, and bread. Lenin's April theses called for the overthrow of the provisional government and the establishment of a government led by workers and peasants. His speeches and writings electrified the masses, and the Bolsheviks gained significant support. In October 1917, Lenin and the Bolsheviks launched a coup against the provisional government, seizing power in what became known as the October Revolution. The Bolsheviks' success marked the beginning of a new era in Russian history. What were Lenin's key achievements? After the revolution, Lenin faced the monumental task of consolidating power and building a socialist state. His government implemented radical reforms, including nationalization of industry. Factories and banks were taken under state control. Land redistribution. Land was seized from landlords and redistributed to peasants. Withdrawal from World War I. Lenin signed the Treaty of Brest-Litovsk in 1918, ending Russia's involvement in the war but ceding significant territory to Germany. Establishment of the Cheka, a secret police force to suppress opposition and maintain control. Lenin also helped form the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, USSR, in 1922, laying the foundation for a one-party state that would dominate the 20th century. What challenges did Lenin face? Lenin's leadership was not without controversy. The Russian Civil War, 1917 to 1923, erupted as anti-Bolshevik forces, known as the Whites, fought against the Red Army. Lenin's government used harsh measures to maintain power, including mass executions and forced requisitions of food. These policies, combined with the devastating effects of the war, led to famine and suffering. Despite these challenges, Lenin's leadership ensured Bolshevik victory. However, his health began to decline after a series of strokes in 1922, forcing him to step back from active leadership. What is Lenin's legacy? Lenin died in 1924, leaving behind a complex and polarizing legacy. To his supporters, he was a visionary who freed Russia from oppression and built a government based on equality and justice. To his critics, he was a ruthless leader whose policies paved the way for authoritarianism under Stalin. Globally, Lenin's ideas and actions inspired revolutionary movements, from China to Cuba. His writings, including The State and Revolution and What is to be Done, remain foundational texts from Marxist thought. Why does Lenin matter today? Lenin's impact on history is undeniable. He showed how revolutionary ideas could be transformed into action, challenging the old order and creating something entirely new. His vision of socialism continues to influence debates about power, equality, and the role of the state. Lenin once said, "Revolutions are the locomotives of history." Whether you view him as a hero or a controversial figure, his life and legacy remind us of the transformative power of revolutionary leadership.